evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. Christmas is here, as you can see from my little Christmas tree there. So we'll be having our Christmas special live stream. When's that? Is that the 2 weeks' time, I think, we're having that. So that should be fun. So tune in for that, and we'll have a lot of interaction and fun and games for that. But this week in politics hasn't been fun and games particularly. It's been a pretty grave week with the vote on assisted dying, as they call it, in Westminster. So that's a very serious issue. I'm going to talk about that quite a lot tonight. I've got lots of different angles to come at that from. I'd be interested to hear what you're thinking about that as well. But some other things before I get into my slides. I'm halfway through preparing a video about Donald Trump's Bible. I don't know if you've seen this story, but Donald Trump is promoting this, I think it's called the God Bless America Bible. So he made a video saying you all need to get this Bible and read it. And I'm going to make a video of my thoughts of it. I would imagine a lot of people's response to that would be pretty polarized. There were some people saying, oh, how wonderful. Look, Donald Trump is recommending the Bible. Isn't that fantastic? And I bet other people would be saying, oh, Dimmy, this is absolutely appalling. Whatever is he doing that? That's totally wrong. Well, I'm going to look at it from a few different angles. So hopefully you'll find that interesting. Keep your eye open for that later on. What else is coming out this week? On Saturday, I'm going to open the new Epic Education Nursery, which is under the wing of Vision Church in Glasgow. So that's great. They're opening a nursery, very much a Christian nursery. So that's a fantastic venture. So well done them for getting that off the road, jumping off the ground, jumping through all the regulatory hoops, sorting out staffing and facilities. I've seen some pictures of it. It looks great. I'm very much looking forward to going to that and seeing that getting underway. That's brilliant news there. What else has been going on? Just a quick mention. You've probably seen LGBT Youth Scotland is getting a fair old hammering at the moment. And they certainly won't be getting any sympathy from me. It was maybe 2 or 3. I often find this in Scottish politics. Often something that I talked about, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, suddenly becomes a hotter topic 2 or 3 years later. But I looked at them a while ago, looking at just a number of cases of abuse by their staff. There's the, I was going to say celebrated, notorious one of James Rennie, wasn't it, who was the chief executive of it, but then went to prison for offences with children, shall we say. But there have been other incidents as well where LGBT Youth Scotland staff have been behaving inappropriately, shall we put it that way. So they should be defunded. They shouldn't be anywhere near schools. I mean, defunded, that would mean close them down because they exist on taxpayers' money. So it's been great to see them getting a lot of criticism in mainstream press as well. It's funny, I find with things, I looked at them ages ago and raised various issues. Then it comes around again, I'm tending to think, oh, I'm bored of that. I've done that. I've looked into them. I've talked about that. But there's been other people taking on the baton and they've been really under pressure. So all well and good with that. I just thought I'd give Elon Musk a quick mention. I don't know if he's watching tonight. Hello, Elon, if you are. A few things there. He's been in the news big time, hasn't he? Saying he was going to donate or considering donating $100 million to the Reform Party. Now, when I saw those headlines, my first thought was, well, what a non-story, because that's illegal. If you want to give money to a UK political party and you're not a UK citizen, then your limit is £500. So Elon Musk is very welcome to give £500 to Reform, but if he gives £501, then he's breaking the law. That is an inadmissible donation. But so I thought, surely all this news coverage, surely they don't just not know this is not allowed. But reading between the lines, it seems like Elon Musk talking about some clever ways of basically beating the system. So he's saying he's going to give the money, but he'll get the lawyers on the case that maybe it will be a donation from the British branch of X, for example, which would be definitely against the spirit of the law, and one would imagine against the letter of the law as well, one way or another. So I think basically he shouldn't get away with doing that. That would just be wrong. The reason we have these rules is for very good reason, to prevent foreign interference in UK elections. So Elon Musk, he can't claim, oh, it was just the UK branch of X. It was nothing to do with me. It wasn't my foreign interference. It was just those UK citizens working at the UK head office of X. They decided to make a political donation on behalf of the UK X business. I mean, that's not going to wash, is it? Because he's already said that he wants to give the money to the Reform Party. So basically, that's not going to happen. And if it does happen, there will be a massive legal wrangle. And as far as I'm concerned, the right side to win would be you cannot do that, because the rules are very, very, very clear indeed. Just while we're on the topic of money and political parties, now, if that happened, the Conservatives and Labour, they would pull out all the, well, if that was threatening to happen, they would pull out all the stops to make sure they find every regulation and whatever to make sure that does not happen, because it would be so unfair for someone to totally skew the UK political landscape by giving £100 million to a particular party. Now, the Labour and Conservatives will be thinking that's an outrage, but in the normal run of things, that's basically what they do. They receive donations on a totally different scale than other parties. Like donations to the Conservatives and Labour compared to Reform, a totally different league, completely different. I've got a problem with that as well. I don't think you should be able to buy political influence. I think the limit for political donations should be something like, I don't know, £5,000 a year, something like that, £10,000 a year, so that one person can't have a massive influence on the political landscape of the nation, because that is just undemocratic. It's not fair. Why should someone who happens to have made a fortune in whatever business it happens to be, why should they have the power to be able to sway elections by just spending money to enable parties to campaign? I think that's just wrong. I think state funding of political parties as well is worth considering, so that when you put yourself up for election the first time, you get no state funding. But if you get, say, 1% of the vote, then you get 1% of the state funding for political parties the next time. If the next time you manage to go up to 2%, then, you know, so in other words, the funding follows your electoral performance. So that means for a small party, if you get a foot in the door, then you can build on that and the money comes along with it. Because funding for political parties, a lot of it is not people thinking, I really wish the Labour Party were in government, we'll make a donation to them. It's more like, we think the Labour Party might get in, we want to be their friends, we want them to make the right decisions as far as our business is concerned, so we're going to give them £1 million. And then, well, you know, there's nothing in writing, but we obviously know that it's not going to do any harm, is it, when it comes to having these negotiations about these tricky issues in the future. So that's a massive source of generator of income for the main political parties. As soon as they think you're going to be the government, then it's in the interest of a lot of people to throw money at those parties. And it is just wrong. Let's stay with Elon Musk for a little while. What do I think about him? I think he's a very interesting character. He's obviously extremely intelligent. He's very interesting to listen to on a vast range of subjects. I think sometimes the halo effect applies to him. Are you familiar with the halo effect? It's the idea of if someone's really good at one thing, people assume that they're really good at everything. So, for example, Imran Khan, the great cricketer, becomes president of Pakistan. Now, I don't know how good or bad a president he was, but he would have become president, I assume, because people thought, oh, he was a fantastic cricketer. He's a winner. He's the sort of bloke we want as president. Maybe the same applies to Trump a little bit as well. The rally driver, Ari Vatanen, one of my heroes, he became an MEP in Finland as well. There's lots of cases. I mean, look at Zelensky as well. Film star, TV star, goes on to become president. And it happens in lots of other spheres as well. So if you get someone who's very successful at something, people tend to hang on their every word about topics that are completely unrelated to their sphere of success. Now, it applies to people's perception of people, but I think it also applies sometimes to the people themselves. The person themselves can tend to think, I'm the sort of person that's very successful, so people should listen to me because my opinions, I'm obviously probably right. I mean, look at my track record. So I'm probably right. So you should listen to what I've got to say about everything. But I say to Elon Musk, sometimes he speaks about matters where he's not an expert and he speaks as though he's completely unaware that there is such a thing as an expert in those fields. So, for example, when it comes to moral issues, he's pretty off the cuff. He was talking about abortion recently. He was saying, if the child's viable, if it can survive outside the womb, then that's murder. Now, has he really thought that through? Why viability is such an important criterion? I suspect not. I suspect not. He's just shooting from the hip, basically. So I think, yeah, it's a very interesting character. I think in terms of his family life as well, I don't think he'd be quite on our sort of pro-marriage wavelength. I understand That's the way it appears. So a very interesting character. Overall, I think a force for good, but should he be allowed to influence UK politics in that way? Absolutely not. Before I leave this topic, let's just talk about influence on UK politics, particularly the Reform Party. I mean, the Reform Party, as you've probably heard me say, it's the political wing of GB News, or GB News is the media wing of the Reform Party. I mean, I think, is it 3 out of their 5 MPs have got their own TV shows on GB News. And you watch GB News, and they just bang on endlessly about the Reform Party's priorities. It really is pretty close to being, is it 24 hours? Anyway, however many hours they broadcast, party political broadcasts on behalf of the Reform Party. Now, that's the case as well, where you've got someone with a lot of money who's decided to spend their money to influence the UK politics, and basically, more specifically, to promote the Reform Party. Should it be possible to do that? Well, I think not now. You know, someone could say at this point, well, hang on, that's what's been going on the other side forever. That's what very wealthy people have done. They've got control of newspapers and they've exerted huge influence. And people say, now you're complaining just because you don't like the Reform Party. And I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying in general, I don't think it's healthy where extremely wealthy people can basically call the shots in UK politics by, say, media, massive donations and running media organizations. They're basically just promoting one political party. Anyway, that was only supposed to be a little aside. So that's Elon Musk. Right, let's have a look what's been happening. A couple of comments. Good evening. Do fire comments in. Now, what have we got to talk about? Now, it's not very often we talk about local politics on this live stream, because sometimes, to be honest, I don't find it the most interesting, some of the things they talk about. And it is obviously local, so it's not very applicable to everyone around Scotland. But a couple of stories here are interesting. There was a by-election in, well, I say my ward. I don't actually live in the ward. My garden fence is the border of the ward. But it's the ward where I've stood a couple of times, Collington Fairmile Head. And this was something put out by the Labour Party. So ward results in the last election, 2022, Labour got so many votes, Conservative SNP, right, Lib Dems right down. So Labour is saying the Lib Dems can't win here. Now, guess who won? The Lib Dems. Now, I think that sort of advert, that sort of publicity material, that should be banned, because that is not true. You're saying something, you're stating a fact that is untrue. The Lib Dems can't win here. Who says? They did. So that statement is obviously untrue. So I think it should be banned. Now, of course, who are the worst? Who's the most guilty of this sin? It's the Lib Dems and their dodgy graphs that they turn out left, right, and centre. So no sympathy for the Lib Dems, but in general, there should be a ban on this sort of leaflet. Or, you know, it's a 2-horse race. Only us or them can win. Just not true. You cannot say things that are not true in election campaigns. Now, carrying on the story, because there's a bit more of a story here. So the Lib Dems did win, the Lib Dem lady. And as soon as she'd won, the day after she'd won, she put a house up for sale because she was moving to Dubai, I think. So during the campaign, she knew that she was about to leave Scotland. And her campaign was, you know, I'm the local candidate. I'm the only one who lives in the ward. And she won. But during the campaign, she must have known that she wouldn't actually be able to do the job. Or did she plan to do the job, living most of the time in Dubai or something? I mean, who knows? So really appalling that someone would stand for election, get elected, and then, sorry, I'm going to go off and live somewhere else now. You need to have another election. People have said she should be made to pay the bill for the election, which, did I hear £30,000? That sounds quite low for us. So there's now going to be another by-election in the ward, and it's a double one because yet another councillor has resigned in the ward as well, the SNP one, who's gone off to be a government advisor of some sort. There's another one in Glasgow, I just saw a couple of days ago, where the Labour candidate, I think, won a by-election, became a councillor, but refused to resign from his council job. He already worked for the council, so he refused to resign from his job, which was against the rules for being a councillor. So he said, I don't want to be a councillor after all. So they're going to have another election. I mean, how ridiculous. What sort of person can put themselves forward for election for a party that they really are expecting to win, and then they just haven't read the rules properly? They don't know what they're doing. Then the council has to run a whole other election. So, yeah, very, very strange. We've got a few plans for the rerun of the Collington Fairmile Head by-election. We're going to be quite active in it, but we'll report on that in a little while. Right, this is quite interesting. Hang on, let me just delete Mr. Anti-Semite. Do we ban user and delete their comments? Right, bye-bye. Take your business elsewhere, please, sir. Right, so higher pass rate. So this is quite interesting. So the green line in the middle is the pass rate for higher exams. For those of you that might not know, higher is the exam that Scottish students normally sit when they are 17. And it's basically the main qualification for getting entry to university. There are advanced highers as well, but highers are often the crucial ones. So see what goes along there. So the green line dipped a bit 2019, absolutely shot up 2020, 2021, 2022, and it's sort of back down to about where it was, slightly lower than where it was. Now, the massive hump, of course, is COVID. Now, what happened in COVID? Did COVID make children get cleverer? No. Did COVID make teachers teach better? No. Did the children actually learn more by being at home than being in school? No. What happened was they scrapped exams and basically said to the teachers basically had to make the grades up, and it was a pretty open system. Let's put it that way. It wasn't a very structured and tight and consistent system. It was a pretty open system. Then when the SQA tried to moderate and say, whoa, these grades are far too high, then you had kids marching around with placards saying, we want our rights, we want higher grades in the exams. So John Swinney said, no, we're not going to capitulate to this. The grades are going to stay. Then a couple of days later, he said, oh, okay, we'll change your mind. You can have higher grades after all. So total nonsense going on there. But the other two lines are interesting. The blue line at the top, least deprived areas. I don't like that term. They're deprived areas. So there's someone's gone in and stolen things from people. You could say a poorer area, less wealthy area. Anyway, so in the wealthiest areas, you can see the higher pass rate is obviously higher. And in the lower, poorer areas, you can see the higher pass rate is very much lower. Now, you see the gap there. The gap is actually widening. Now, the SNP government has said its mission, as far as education is concerned, is to close the attainment gap. That is their mission. It's not to raise standards. It's not to reach excellence. It's not to instill good moral values and sound character in the pupils. It's to close the attainment gap, a social engineering project. And you can see from this, it's not going well at all. The attainment gap is widening. Now, if I were looking at it, I would say, well, I don't care about the attainment gap. I want everyone to do as well as they possibly can. So forget the attainment gap. We're just going to get everyone working hard, taught well, and let's see how well they can all do. That's what I'd be saying. But what will the Scottish government, they'll be saying? They'll be saying, first of all, how come all this money we've thrown at this problem isn't working? They'll be then saying, this is embarrassing. What can we do about it? Because in the Scottish Parliament, the Conservatives, they're just as hot on the attainment gap. Whereas the Conservatives should be saying, this whole philosophy is nonsense. We're not interested in it. But no. It's the Scottish Conservatives who don't really have any philosophical foundation. So they go along with it and say, SNP, you're not doing a good job because you're not closing the attainment gap. So what will the SNP do? Well, if you looked at that graph and thought, right, you want to get the red line and the blue line as close together as you can. How do you do it? Where were they closest? 2020, maybe? So 2020, as far as closing the attainment gap was concerned, was the best year ever. What did they do? Well, the teachers made the grades up. Instead of having proper exams, moderated, standardized, formal assessment, we had a much looser system with a lot more opportunity for teacher generosity, shall we say. So it looks like that's the way to close the attainment gap. And that's the way the Scottish government is moving. They're just pushing away from exams towards teachers making the grades up. And the reason is because they want to see that blue line and that red line touch each other. They want them to come together. And they'll have to take pretty drastic measures to make that happen. but that is their mission. Right, what else is going on? I put this image up on after the vote in Westminster about assisted dying. I'll try and avoid saying the real word because I think social media programs don't like it. Which reminds me, actually, do share this. Hit the share button, share on Facebook, repost on X or whatever, so we can have some more people watching. That would be great. Let's just look at this. A good comment from Tom. Correlation will likely to be least deprived, have married parents at home. Yes, that is a massive factor in this. Absolutely. If they want to talk about privilege, two-parent privilege is the most important and powerful one. But of course, generally, that is just not considered. They don't even collect data about it because it's totally taboo. It's all got to be about money or race or LGBT or sex, or one or the other. That's what they really want to bring about. So that picture of the dam bursting is a fake, obviously, you can see. But is that true? Is that what happened in Westminster on Friday, wasn't it? Did the dam burst? I mean, is that it now? Are the floodwaters going to come down? Well, my personal view is yes, I think it is now. Some people will keep fighting. They'll be saying, keep writing to your MSPs. We can still do this. We can still do this. Let's keep campaigning. But to be honest, I think it's good. It's not going to turn around at this point. The point I've made is that this was going to happen from the 4th of July. When the current batch of MPs were elected, then the die was cast. This was going to happen. Now, campaigning groups have said lots of the MPs were undecided. They didn't know what they thought. It was only when they heard the arguments that they made their mind up. And the campaigning groups might feel, well, you know, we made a difference with some of them. And they did. They did. But the thing is, all the arguments, they were assessed by people with pre-existing values and attitudes. And for example, a lot of the new Labour MPs, what values and attitudes did they have? Well, very secular, liberal, progressive values. So even if they hadn't thought about assisted suicide particularly before, I said the word then, even if they hadn't thought about it much before, with the set of values they hold, when they did come to consider it, it was almost inevitable they were going to come to the side that, yes, that they're on the side of assisted dying. So I think the die was cast from the 4th of July. I did say, some people were saying it was on a knife edge. I thought it was going to pass. I thought with a huge new intake of Labour MPs, surely it's going to pass, and it did. Right, so will it pass through the other stages? Yes, I think so. Will it pass in Scotland now? Well, the interesting thing in Scotland, a majority of Scottish MPs voted against it, which I found quite interesting. The SNP ones didn't vote, but even if the SNP ones had all voted for it, it still would have been a majority of Scottish MPs who voted against it. Now, I found that quite surprising there. So with Liam MacArthur's assisted dying bill going through the Scottish Parliament, what will happen? Liam MacArthur will feel emboldened. And I think a lot of people in the Scottish Parliament would think, we really don't like the idea of England and Wales being more progressive than us. And also people who might have thought, this is a bit risky for my political reputation, put him a head above the parapet here, voting for assisted dying or saying I'm going to support it. That's, it's a bit risky, not sure about that. But now it's passed, it won't be seen as so risky. So I think the support among the MSPs would be there, and I think it will pass in Scotland. The only glimmer of hope, I would say, is if Scottish nationalism becomes a big factor and it becomes a, look at what those terrible English people are doing. We would never do something like that in Scotland. We're different. We're better people there than people in England. Now, if that type of Scottish nationalist pride creeps in, that could be a positive thing for the campaign against assisted dying. It could be. But to be honest, I really don't see it. I think it will pass in Scotland now. So that is, a disaster, tragedy. It will cause a huge amount of suffering and harm. And the other thing as well, it's not just the suffering and harm, it is just wrong. Suicide is wrong. Assisting suicide is wrong. Encouraging suicide is wrong. Suggesting suicide is wrong. So it's a moral stain on the nation, if you like. And there'll be cross-border traffic as well for it. If someone gets a long-term illness, we'll hear about people having to go, they're going to move to Berwick and then after a year they'll be able to get the poison to take and kill themselves. There'll be stories like that coming out soon as well. Right, lots of things to say about this. Let's have a look. The Reform Party. How do the Reform Party do in this? They've got 5 MPs. Overall, they voted for assisted dying. 3 of them voted for it. 2 of them voted against it, which is sort of what I expected. I mean, that's the Reform Party. I'd say that the core of the Reform Party, the main bulk of the Reform Party, are sort of pretty right. Well, I don't mean this it's not criticism, but like towards very right wing, put it that way, very right wing and libertarian. That's like Nigel Farage, isn't it? Very right wing, libertarian, decriminalize drugs, etc. Not a socially conservative party. And that was reflected in their own MPs. I say 3 of them voted for assisted dying and 2 of them voted against, which I hope will be a bit of a wake-up call for some of those people who, I talk about the conservative delusion, who suffer from the reform delusion, people who delude themselves that the Reform Party is in some way a pro-life party, which it just absolutely isn't. So if you're concerned about the value of human life, a vote for reform is a vote for don't care, or it's a vote for probably against the value of human life. Now, what's interesting about this, now, they've got a lot of flack from people that they want to keep on board. The Reform Party, they're quite keen in particular to keep Christians on board, which is why they trot out Christian language here and there in the hope that Christians will think, oh, they said some words I like, so I'll quite like them. They're assuming Christians are that naive. But soon after this, Nigel Farage said he thinks there should be, no, he didn't say that. He said maybe it will be a good idea to have a debate at Westminster about slightly reducing the abortion time limit because the viability age for a fetus has now reduced by a week or 2 from 24 weeks. So he didn't state a position. He just said it might be a good idea to have a debate on it. Now, why did he do that? Now, am I too cynical in saying this? You tell me what you think. Am I too cynical in thinking that in Reform HQ, they said, right, 3 of us voted for assisted dying, 2 of us didn't. Right, all the social conservatives, they're not happy with us. Can we just throw them a bit of something to just try and reel them in a little bit? I mean, what can we say pro-life that actually doesn't amount to saying anything? It's actually contentless. We should maybe have a debate about something. So is that too cynical? I suspect not. We remember Boris Johnson once when he blocked the gender recognition reform, when the Conservatives blocked gender recognition reform in Scotland. Obviously, all the trans activists were going bonkers about the Conservatives, saying they're transphobic bigots. So the Conservatives said, oh, we'll put transgender things back in our conversion therapy bill. It was so obvious what was happening. We've upset the transgender lobby, so let's try and keep them on side. So the Reform Party are thinking, we've upset the social conservatives, mainly Christians. Let's try and get them back again. Let's just say the slightest little thing about abortion, and maybe that will help. What would my view? Now, my view about reducing abortion time limits, I would say it's a good thing. I mean, if I was in the Parliament and that came up, I'd say yes. If someone said, will you be a co-sponsor of a bill about it? I would probably say yes. But my concern is that it gives credence to the line that we're trying to decide when the fetus is viable. But that is of no moral significance at all. So if I did back a bill like that, I would be very explicit all the way through that I'm regarding this as making an appalling law very, very, very slightly less appalling by possibly saving a tiny number of lives per year because the time limit's changed. I would make sure that my vote was not interpreted as me saying, oh yeah, the cutoff points just moved slightly. I definitely wouldn't want people to get that idea. Anyway, that's the Reform Party. Let's see what else we have. This was an interesting one. Dave Brennan of Brephos. Brephos is it's a small organization. They work with churches trying to awaken them to the pro-life cause. I've met Dave briefly. A very good speaker, really good. He said this. He said, will the church at last wake up to the fact that no, we don't have good people basically trying to do their best leading our country? I found that quite thought-provoking. Have I said that? would I say generally the politicians in charge, I mean, they're trying to do the best thing from their point of view? I think in a lot of areas, it's true. When it comes to core moral issues, if a politician's got completely immoral views, but they maybe sort of don't know it and are trying to, are they sort of not responsible? Or do they know it because they've got a conscience like everyone else? So, yeah, discuss. What do you think? What do you think? Are the politicians basically good people trying to do their best, but in some cases they're just not very good at it, and they've got some wonky values, but they don't really realize it, or they're not good people? I suppose another way of framing the question is, can you be a good person and support the killing of unborn children? Interesting question. Very interesting question. I mean, can you be a good person and support the mass killing of infants? You'd say, surely not. Can you be a good person and support the mass killing of unborn children? Maybe the answer is surely not. I don't know. Anyway, it made me think. I thought that was very, very interesting. Are you in favor of criminalizing women who have abortions, and why not? If so, we are favor. Yeah, we would ban abortion apart from when the mother's life is in danger. We would ban abortion, or another way you could put about it, we would protect the unborn. So that was definitely our policy. Reform, yeah, definitely not a pro-family party. They put family on their when they do a press conference on the screen behind them. They have like family is one of the words they have there, don't they? But then they're not a pro-family party in the way that we are by a long, 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 long way. Right. Oh, halfway through already. Yeah, still on the assisted dying thing. I mean, who would have thought you'd see adverts like this? And this was on the tube in London. Adverts about assisted dying. I mean, if someone had said 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there'll be adverts on the tube advertising assisted dying, that'd be something from like Brave New World, wouldn't it? That'd be something from science fiction, some sort of dystopian future. But there we have it, with a person oh so happy, obviously having a great time, thinking about the possibility of getting some poison from the doctor, taking it, and choosing to leave all of her family, friends, loved ones, and to die. Yeah, really bizarre. This was a great one. I don't know if you, Freddie Gray works for the Spectator magazine. He's very amusing. I do like listening to him. But I think this point is spot on, absolutely spot on. It applies at Westminster. It applies at Holyrood as well. Whenever people in Britain talk about Parliament being at its best, you know something truly awful is happening. It's absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Think about it. I remember when they introduced LGBT inclusive education in Scotland, they had a debate. It was a recitation afternoon. It wasn't a debate, where one politician after another from all parties, including the Conservatives, stood up and said, what an honor to vote for this fantastic, to speak in favor of this fantastic measure. It's a really wonderful, this is what the Parliament's for. It's great to have an afternoon like this in the Parliament where we all agree this is the Scottish Parliament at its best. Instead of thinking, no, this is the absolute worst. It's passing measures that are just going to mess up young people and do massive harm, cause enormous pain and suffering for young people and their families. But the Parliament, yeah, it's at its best. Yeah, and again, at Westminster, they were saying it's Parliament at its best. Because of the debate, I suppose, because it's not a party political issue, I guess the heat's taken out of it, and the debate was quite a bit more civilized than it might otherwise have done. But why is it not a party political issue? Because I think the DUP have maybe got a policy, but virtually all the parties in the UK Parliament don't care about assisted suicide. They don't think it's important enough to have a policy on. Now they would say, oh, it's not that it's not important enough, it's that it's a matter of personal conscience. I think, hang on, matter of conscience, what does your conscience tell you? Your conscience tells you what's right and wrong. In other words, they say, this is a matter of what's right and wrong. So we don't want to have a policy about that. What would be the point of having a policy just about something, whether something is right or wrong? I mean, that's not important, is it? Whereas the family party, we say, well, that's absolutely, they're the most important things. They're the things you have to get in place first, and then you think about the things where, you can take different opinions, it's trying to balance things, etc. In this advert, they chose a young woman. Realistic representation? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, total fantasy. But that's what they do. All part of the tactics. So do give this a share if you can as well. That would be great. What else have we got? Paul Coleman. He's from. Let me get this right. AFD. No. ADF. Alliance Defending Freedom. Not to be confused with the Alternative for Germany. And there's another party in the UK or something. I met Paul a little while ago at a Lawyers Christian Fellowship thing. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how I ended up there. He was talking about Keir Starmer. I've talked about this before. Keir Starmer has been a campaigner for assisted dying for decades, and he's finally got his way. So I think for Keir Starmer, when he became leader of the Labour Party, director of public prosecutions, before then becoming prime minister, at each stage, it's been a real priority for him to get assisted dying through, and he has done it. So that has been a grassroots movement to some degree, but to a large extent, this has been Keir Starmer and the Labour Party's mission to bring this in. So again, did you talk about that much in the election campaign? Do you remember that? What are your 5 priorities, Mr. Starmer? Well, I'm going to sort out the NHS. I'm going to get the economy going, and we're going to bring it in so that doctors can give poison to their patients so they can kill themselves. Did he spend the election campaign saying that? In his battle bus? In all his interviews in the media? No. Not at all. This is what always happens. They don't want to talk about these issues at election time, but then as soon as they're elected, right, off they go and do them. Now, if you'd have gone to one of the BBC election debates and you wanted to ask a question, you have to submit your question in advance, but otherwise you end up with, people ask the wrong questions. So you'd submit your question. If you asked a question about assisted suicide in a BBC program, they would just cut it out. They say, no, people are not interested in that. It's going to be about the NHS or schools or teacher numbers or the economy or EU or whatever. You're not allowed to ask something about that. So it's kept out of the election campaign. Then as soon as they're in, they are off. Yeah, this is from the Family Party. I actually wrote this tweet. Just the quality of debate generally seems better in Westminster. And I don't understand why. I don't understand why. Because let's say, for example, you're in the Labour Party and you're ambitious. You want to become an elected representative. So you want to become an MP or you want to become an MSP. I don't think anyone in the Labour Party thinks, I'm going to sit out the Scottish election because, well, I'm not so bothered about that. I'm going to wait for the Westminster election because I want to be an MP. So there's some sort of selection effect where the most intelligent and articulate or whatever ones end up as MPs rather than MSPs. I don't believe there's a selection effect that creates that. But it is definitely a fact that the quality of debate in Westminster is better than in the Scottish Parliament. And I can't quite work out why. So any theories, I'd be very interested to hear them. And then maybe in the Scottish Parliament, it gets cozier. And as it gets cozier, people feel they need to put less effort into what they're going to say, because everyone's just repeating the same things. I spoke to an MSP once who shall remain nameless, but she said that what happens in the Parliament is if there's a debate in the afternoon, a campaigning group will send an email to every MSP in the morning, and it will basically be a speech written for them. But it's longer than you need. Maybe you get a 6-minute speech, but this will be 10 minutes worth or 12 minutes worth. So you just need to get it up on your computer, delete half of it, and then there's your speech. And you watch the Scottish Parliament so-called debates, and you can see that's exactly what's happening. They're just making the same points, and they just pick and mix from what's been sent to them that morning, and it's not a debate at all. Whereas in Westminster, it's more someone says something, someone responds to it, and then the person responds to what they've said. In the Scottish Parliament, it's more someone gives a speech, then the next person, it's as though they haven't even listened to what the previous person said. I mean, it really is poor. But anyway, I'm not sure why that is. Right, Care Not Killing. Care Not Killing, I thought, ran an excellent campaign. I thought the campaign in general against assisted dying was really good. And it couldn't have been better, really, as far as I can tell. They seem to do everything right with it. But as I say, but on election day, you're trying to persuade the wrong people. Democracy is not about electing people then changing their minds. Democracy is about electing the people who agree with you, the people who represent your views. Yeah, but Kim Leadbeater, she kept saying, oh, we'll pass this law, but it can't be changed in the future. I mean, what? Total nonsense. Total nonsense. I mean, I just couldn't understand how she could even think of saying those sort of things. What we did have at Westminster was a string of personal stories, which to my mind, to be honest, I don't need to hear any of them. And if I need to hear one is enough. I can understand that in some cases there's terrible suffering. I don't want to hear 10 stories. What I'd like to hear is someone with expertise in the area to talk about how common these sort of cases are, what can be done in different cases, tell me about the cases where it is really difficult to manage pain. That's what I'd like to hear. So a succession of stories, it's appealing to emotion, and empathy, if you like, is not a helpful, it's not a logical means in decision making. So obviously take into account human suffering and give it its proper weight. But if you're a politician, if you're in the parliament, you should be giving it its proper weight according to statistics and intelligent analysis, not on the basis of hearing 10 or 20 stories in a row that pull at your heartstrings. Right, yeah, that was something we put on social media after the vote. It's true, the value of life is under attack from both ends. And we could have put on the candle there, you know, sanctity of life or whatever. So this assisted dying vote it's a sea change in Britain. They've crossed the Rubicon, so that's a very significant change. So that started the candle going at the end of life. At the beginning of life, the candle's well and truly been burning strongly for a long time. And in Scotland, it's going to jump along maybe quite soon, because the Scottish government's having this review of abortion policy that will only result in liberalisation of abortion laws in Scotland. So attacks on the sanctity of life, value of life from both directions. Which brings me to this. Let me just post something in the comments. Let me get that done. There it is. Now, a couple of months ago, we got some lights. That's 1,000 fairy lights there. In fact, I can show you what they look like. They're like this. Let's get them to the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, so this is a roll of 1,000 fairy lights. We've got 4,000 at the moment. We've got 4 of those rolls. Now, that's just one of them there. And they're not very spread out. I could have spread them out more, actually. So that's 1,000. What we'd like to do is to get 18,000. 18,000 is the number of unborn children lost to abortion in the last year in Scotland. So if you imagine 18,000 lights there in front of the Scottish Parliament, that's quite an area. That would be a very, very striking image. That's not the sort of thing anyone's going to walk past and ignore. So it would be very photogenic, very striking, poignant, and powerful. So it's something we very much want to do. So if we've got the 18,000 lights, we could go to the Scottish Parliament, hold some sort of event there, you know, to get a placard or two made as well, or project onto the Parliament wall very quickly before they tell us we can't. So something we want to do at the Parliament would be a powerful thing. Not before Christmas. We'll do it after Christmas when it's still dark, though. That the evenings are still dark. And then also, when we've got this like light display effectively, we'll take it to other places. You know, how about in front of Marischal College in Aberdeen, or in front of the Caird Hall in Dundee, over to Glasgow, George Square, or wherever. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities, places we can take this. And we're anywhere, we get a few people together, and I think it could be worthy of a photograph in the media, mainstream media, very possibly, if they were being fair, because it will be extremely striking, a very powerful image. So why am I telling you this? Partly because I think you're interested to know what we've got up our sleeves, and partly we'd like you to chip in to pay for them. So the strings of lights there, 1,000 lights, they're about £30 each. We've got 4. So by my rusty maths, for the rest of them, it's £420. So we're doing a crowdfunder to raise that. So I've just put the link in for Facebook and YouTube. So if you're on X, you can have a look at our posts. You find it there as well. So do chip in. It's not a huge amount. So I think people will chip in and we'll hit the target well before Christmas, all being well. We'll have them all set. Then as soon as the Christmas lights come down, I don't think it'd be good to do this alongside Christmas decorations. As soon as the Christmas lights come down, then we'll think about how we're going to deploy these. Yeah, I think it's going to be very powerful, and we'll get lots and lots of use out of them for outdoors, but also indoors as well. If any sort of pro-life event would like to have a display of these lights as an illustration, then we could do that. We could supply them. So that's the plan. So they've got great potential, and we would appreciate your contribution to them. So do go over to the crowdfunder now and make a little donation. That would be great. Thank you very much. Right, 14 minutes to go. That's an AI generated image, isn't it? Of course. Now, again, I thought it's a good point being made here. Now, with the climate change things, I've talked about it a few times. I'm not a climate change doesn't exist or climate change is not important. I'm more climate change is important, but so are a lot of other things. And the steps we take to tackle climate change are so ineffective and make such a tiny difference that we really need to weigh them up carefully against their negative effects. And this little image here sums it up quite well. So we've got the lady there with the baby saying, "We're poor and hungry," and the looking African say, and we've got the Westerner saying, "You're in luck. We just made a climate deal costing trillions to reduce global temperatures by 0.02 degrees C in 100 years," which obviously is not going to benefit anyone at the moment. Now, what that image could also have made clear is that the climate measures that will also have made the world poorer a bit as well, that they will have undermined economic development for the world in general. The statistic I keep coming back to is apparently if air travel was just stopped completely, not a single plane took off ever again in the world, then I think it was by the year 2100, climate change would have been delayed by 3 weeks. The process of climate change would have been delayed by 3 weeks by scrapping all air travel completely. So I'm not saying there's no point doing anything, but I'm just saying you need to be realistic and see what can usefully be done. Oh, we had a couple of by-elections last week. Danny Smith and Andrew Muir. They're rounded to the nearest percentage. They're both actually rounded up. The last ones we did, some of them were rounded down as well. So yeah, so 2%. I mean, that's actually not bad. So we used to say, 1% would be our baseline. Wherever we put a candidate up, even if they do absolutely nothing, they're going to get 1%. That used to be the thing. With reform, that maybe wasn't quite true. Sometimes we would slightly dip under 1%. But with these, I mean, this is good. A couple of percent there. Great. I don't think either of them campaigned intensively. Let's put it that way. So that's encouraging. Our policy with by-elections is we just have someone stand wherever we can, even if they're not going to campaign, because people see the name of the family party on the ballot paper, and that's all to the good. So that means to people, right, the family party exists, they're still around, they've got someone near to me, and that's the message they've got. So thanks to Danny and Andrew. Right, there's a post, I'm going to say tweet, whatever, from Katie Faust. Katie's been on this live stream twice, I think. She's in America, but she keeps track of what's going on in the UK. Government-funded fatherlessness on the rise in the UK. More single women and female couples having IVF, which is sad because it's creating fatherless children. When a child's born without a father, that's a sad thing to happen. It's unfortunate to happen, but it's happening more and more through people's choice rather than through it being where something's gone wrong. Sadly, people are making it happen deliberately. Now, in Scotland, is even worse because, I say, part of the Scotland's policy to tackle population decline is to encourage single women to have fertility treatment, which is just totally, totally wrong. I mean, for me, that would be a deal breaker with the government. If my political party brought in that policy, I would have to say bye-bye, because that's a really fundamental principle being breached there. So I would be fascinated to have a chat with Kate Forbes about that, to see how that sits with her values and a membership with the SNP. Right, Alejandro, crowdfunder is annoying. It wants a tip. You have to enter custom amount to put that to 0. All right, sorry about that. It's just crowdfunder, which is the main one. Yeah, so we haven't instructed it to demand a tip from you. But thanks very much for donating. Much appreciated. And this was interesting. Have you heard of Blue Sky? Have you heard of Blue Sky? Blue Sky is an alternative to X. Basically, X used to be very much skewed to left wing. It was a bit of a nightmare if you were sort of more right wing or conservative. You just got hammered on X if you weren't kicked off completely. But then Elon Musk took it over and leveled the playing field. I don't think anyone can argue that Elon Musk messes with the algorithm to make it favor right-wing politics rather than left-wing. But the X algorithm, it's in the public domain, so anyone can look at how X decides what posts to show to people. So it's not biased, but a lot of people from the progressive left, they're not happy with X because they want it to be biased. So they've gone off in a huff. So they haven't gone off in a huff because it's biased against them. They've gone off in a huff because it's not biased against the other side. But let's be a bit more fair to them, though. What they might be saying is X has now become a conduit for real hard right conspiracy type content. And I would say to some degree that's true. That has happened, particularly if you go to the For You instead of the Following tab, get a massive amount of that. But the reason for that is because it's what people want to see. It's what interests people. What piques people's interest. So that's what's happening. It's not that Elon Musk has rigged it to favor that sort of content. It's just that the population, or the people on X in any case, that tends to be what they find most interesting and engaging. Now, I guess the other side could say, well, if it's passing on things that are not true, they should rein it in. But the approach on X, of course, is you put community notes can be put on. But what's happening with Blue Sky? If a lot of people are leaving X and going to Blue Sky, there are going to be fewer people to put community notes on things that are a bit wild and wacky on X. So it's going to create more polarization. So I thought I'd go and have a look at Blue Sky. So I looked it up, went in and logged in. I haven't got an account or anything. So I just looked, what comes up on your home screen when you first go. I'm not following anyone, so it just picked a few random things to put on. So Blue Sky is supposed to be the place where you go for a more wholesome and harmonious, respectful debate, not like X, which is a cesspit of extremism and conspiracy theories. So you go to find the nice people on Blue Sky. So on the first page I got to, when I went to it, was this: scientists found a cure for fascism. Right, smack people around the head, which is most likely to kill them, isn't it? It seems like Blue Sky isn't this haven of virtue that they would like to think it is. I was quite surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised, but anyway, that demonstrates it absolutely from the beginning. I came across this as well in my 10 minutes on Blue Sky. Does the family party need a Blue Sky account? I don't know. If it becomes big, then yeah. The other thing on Blue Sky is the Guardian newspaper has now left X. They've gone off in a huff. I don't need to explain why. You know why, don't you? And they've gone to Blue Sky. But it's saying they've got 367,000 followers. And I don't believe that. I don't believe this happening. It's as though they've taken their follower count from X and they've transferred it over to Blue Sky, even though those followers aren't really there. If you were the Guardian newspaper and you go to Blue Sky and you've got 226 followers, that looks terrible, doesn't it? So I'm wondering if Blue Sky has sort of done a deal where you can take your follower figure from X and still have it there, as a status thing. But anyway, listen to this comment here. So this bloke's talking about why he's not on X anymore. He's left X to go to Blue Sky. We cannot continue to participate in the social network feed of a man who proclaims the death of the media and therefore of journalists. How about that for a leap? So Elon Musk has said something like the mainstream media is dying and I hope it dies, something like that. And this journalist has said, well, if he wants the media to die, he must want journalists to die as well. So it's a death threat. So I've had to leave X. Well, if you're a journalist and you can't, and you think that's rational and sensible, I really don't want to read your opinions about anything. Anyway, so that was my 10 minutes on Blue Sky. I'll maybe pop over again sometime to see what is happening. How are we going? 5 minutes left. We're almost there. I've seen this a few times. It makes me smile every time I see it. So at the top there, a corporation needs 50% male board members and 50% female board members. And all the crowd are listening with smiles on their faces, saying, oh, yeah, that's very true. It's very true. But there's a law in Scotland about the composition of the boards of public bodies, saying they need to be 50%, at least 50% female. So everyone accepts that. But then if you say the team bringing up a child need to be one male and one female, you need gender diversity in the team, then they all go berserk and wave their pitchforks in the air, and you're a total heretic and can be in big trouble. So it's a nice little picture. Yeah, this was a case where I saw something in the news, then someone else said what I was going to say about it. The Scottish Human Rights Council, not to be confused with the Equality and Human Rights Commission Scotland, and not to be confused with various other human rights groups as well for children, young people and adults. The Scottish Human Rights Commission, which is a government-funded, quite a substantial organisation, they went to the Highlands, metaphorically, and said that there's a human rights crisis in the Highlands of Scotland. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. By which they mean, they'll say, for example, there's a right to healthcare, and someone who lives on Little Croft, 80 miles away from the nearest town, it takes a long time for an ambulance to get there. So their right to healthcare isn't being fulfilled. Therefore, there's a human rights crisis. That's the type of thinking that's behind it. Now, what do I think of that? What I think about that is Scottish Human Rights Council, mind your own business. These are not human rights issues. These are local politics issues. So if the healthcare in your area is inadequate in some ways, maybe it's inevitable that there's going to be issues with large distances, then you take that to the council, you take it to the parliament. These are common or garden political issues. Whereas what the Scottish Human Rights Council do, this is what human rights do in general, is they overrule the normal political process and say, right, politicians, we don't care what you say, just forget that. We've decided that these people have to be given such and such a thing, and politicians, you have to do it. Forget what people have voted for. We don't care what's in your manifesto. We're the Scottish Human Rights Council. We decide what the government has to do for people. So if you want something doing by the government, don't bother voting in elections. Come and see us at the Scottish Human Rights Council, and we'll make them do it for you. That's basically the way that they're operating. And it's completely wrong, because it gives the power to human rights organizations and human rights lawyers and ultimately judges. Because human rights are all vague. Okay, you've got a right to healthcare. What does that mean? Does that mean the ambulance has to turn up in 5 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours? I don't know. What does the right to healthcare mean? And no one knows. No one knows until it goes before the judge, and he doesn't know either. So he just makes something up, and then that overrules the political process. So the article here said that Highlanders aren't cowering at the feet of some megalomaniac dictator in Lochaber. Because when you hear about a human rights crisis, that's what you imagine, don't you? People are being disappeared in Dingwall. There's enslavement going on in Kirkwall or something. I mean, it's just nonsense. Right, our hour is up. Is the next slide a very short one? No, the next slide is something I will save for another week. So thank you very much for joining me this evening. What have we got next week? I think we've got a guest next week, and then the week after is the Christmas special. Neil Deepnerain is running the Christmas special. After last time, when I did the quiz, he said to me afterwards that I was sacked and I wasn't allowed to do the quiz again, which I thought was quite forward of him. It's quite upsetting, actually, to be told my Christmas quiz was terrible. So he's going to do it this time, and I'll see what I have to say about his Christmas quiz. Actually, he might be, I might have a thing or two to say about that. Anyway, so do join us for that. Do contribute to our little crowdfunder. We'd appreciate anyone chipping in to that, and then yeah, we'll see that those lights in action in the new year. All right, thanks for watching. Good night.